pictures on social media, right? So like
Yeah. How could I hate
your
that
your
guy?
your 1-year old picture where you're just fat and you got all the little fat
Baby
rolls in your
rolls.
body
Yeah.
and a
Right.
cute little onesie on with like one and a balloon next to you and maybe a stuffed animal. We were all there, right?
Yeah.
We were all there together at one point. We were all one.
Right.
We were all innocent and we smelled good and we
Yeah.
didn't have any hair and we were completely helpless. Like
Right.
someone had to help us. If you looked at that picture and
Yeah.
it said, "You're a fucking asshole," it would be very hard to do that, in my opinion, because you're just like, okay. And it's the same thing with my friends.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I have used social media. And I shared this with you a long time ago, but my wife would often ask me, like, why are you on Facebook debating with your high school friends about Donald Trump? Right. And I'm like, because I'm not going to change their mind, but I'm helping me understand the other side.
You're right.
And in doing so, if I can understand why they believe what they believe, then there's a possibility of us staying friends.
Yeah.
And so the idea with most of my friends, and again, I'm not talking about people that storm the Capitol because I just don't have friends at that
Right.
level that are
Right.
bigots and crazy.
Right.
I'm talking about people that say, I like his policies. I think he's an odious human being, but
Right.
I didn't like Hillary, and here's why. You're like, okay, that's fair. Okay,
Yeah.
she's not exactly the bastion of integrity either. So I got that. But what happens with those conversations is that you two become closer, and then if your other friends are watching, which this happened,
Yeah.
I would get
Yes.
numerous calls on DMs, and people say, "Hey, I really enjoyed that conversation. I enjoyed
Yeah. Right.
I enjoy that you kick people off your feed when they get mean." And
Yeah.
I'm like, it's kind of like inviting me. I invite my friends to my bedroom, just like you did when you were a kid.
Yeah. You're right.
That's our social media now. I got my posters up. I had like John McEnroe and I had, my Marantz stereo system and, my bed and my gerbil cage. And I invite my buddies and we'd listen to Boston
Yeah.
and Aerosmith and right. That was my room. And so today I'm inviting my friends to my room and I'm like, hey, if you're going to be a dick, you got to leave. You
Yeah.
can't
Right.
just come in here and rip on my friend because he has a red hat on. That's not
Yeah.
fair. And that
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. And by the way, this is a really nice guy.
Yeah.
He just happens to believe in something you don't. And at least qualify it. Let's
Yeah.
qualify this relationship. And in doing all of this over the last, I don't know how many years, it actually changed the way my brain works. And that's why I think maybe I was so attached to Andy's idea because our brain can be altered.
Yeah.
The way that we deal with our lives, the way that we deal with stress, the way that we deal with conflict, specific to the emotional sides. And that goes back to the Jonathan Haidt's first book. I don't know if you've ever read that, but it was called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Religion and Politics.
No, I never read that.
It's a phenomenally cool book. As a psychologist, he frames it in basic psychology, which we use in
Right.
advertising. Ocean is the 5 frameworks. So you have openness, you have conscientiousness, you have extroversion, you have agreeableness, and you have neuroticism. And you have all these traits. And then within those traits, you have things that cater to the right and cater to the left.
Mhm.
So if you can understand that your conservative friend, conservative by definition is conserving institutions, right? Conserving meta narratives, those kind of things, then you're like, okay, I don't agree with you, dude. But if I can actually understand that your brain under conscientiousness, there's a derivative that says, I like order, I like sanctity,
Right.
right? And so someone who's really patriotic, as an example, or is very, very offended by someone peeing or touching the flag or burning the flag, some people are like, oh, get over yourself. You're like, well, no, that person is wired that way.
Right.
That's biology. That person actually sees the world differently. And so if you can say, and this is what Dr. Haidt was talking about, he would say that, and I'm paraphrasing and probably bastardizing a lot of his deeper thoughts, but the idea there is that if you have sanctity and order on the right, and you have harm and fairness on the left, which are two huge components to how the left thinks,
Mhm.
everything we really talk about, whether it's abortion or immigrants or anything that we're talking about, is our first lens is through that lens: harm, fairness. Theirs is order, sanctity, borders. But it doesn't mean they're evil. It
Right.
just means that's the way they think. And so what he uses as a really powerful example is that logic is not, and this is where he goes against Andy, and I agree with this, is that it's not about logic and reason. You can't start with logic and reason because human beings historically argue based on subjective emotion.
Right.
So the idea behind it is if let's just say that Ryder, this is his analogy, is that the rider, me in this case, is logic and reason. And I'm atop a 20,000 pound elephant. And someone says, Donald Trump. And my emotions sway to the left, right? And as soon as they do, that was all emotion, had nothing to do with logic and reason. Now, in a post hoc argument, my brain justifies the reason that I swung left.
Oh, yeah. In fact, and this has been recognized for a really long time. I mean, Plato understood how emotions pull us. Pascal in the 17th century also had a lot to say about the limits of reason, that any reason that cannot recognize its own limits is weak indeed. He said, so he was distinguishing between weakness and limitation. You can have a limit and not count as a weakness. But the Enlightenment project wanted to bring everything under the sovereignty of reason and didn't understand that that's impossible with embodied beings like us. So you read, I'm talking about Tolstoy just because I'm reading Tolstoy now, but you see the characters were searching for meaning, purpose, all kinds of things through reason, and it never gets them what they want. And when they finally get the solutions to their problems, it's something beyond reason that has to happen. It's part of a story that has to unfold. And, we were story living creatures and storytelling creatures long before we were reasoning creatures. And so when we plug back into that ancient part of our brain, we can do stuff. We can make things happen, and we can actually change things.
Well, and that's kind of the hope, is that I don't have the answer for it, but I do believe that one-on-one conversations make a difference.
Yeah.
And from that, then it can actually start to cascade, right? Because I think that's where